The morning sun barely peeked over the rooftops of the small town when Daniel unlocked the rusty shutters of his little bike shop. The paint on the wooden sign had long faded, and the bell above the door gave a tired jingle each time it moved. Inside, the air smelled of oil, rubber, and old dreams. Daniel's hands were already darkened with grease, but he wore that same gentle smile he always did. Life hadn't been kind to him, business was slow, bills piled up, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. He never turned away anyone who needed help. Sometimes neighborhood kids would bring in their broken bikes with coins that barely filled their palms, and he would fix them anyway, often slipping a piece of candy into their pockets before they left. This morning felt no different. Daniel swept the floor, humming softly, his stomach growling from skipping breakfast. Yet, to him, kindness mattered more than comfort. As he reached the shop's entrance, his eyes fell on something unusual. Leaning against the wall outside was a sleek bicycle, its frame gleaming in the light. It was no ordinary bike, it was the kind only the wealthy could afford, far too expensive for anyone in his town. The front tire sagged flat, almost as though the rider had stopped here by chance. Daniel paused, wiping his hands on his apron, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Whoever owned it wasn't from around here. He had no idea that this ordinary morning was about to change his life forever. The shop door creaked open, and Daniel looked up to see a young woman step inside. She wore a simple hoodie and jeans, her hair tucked beneath a cap, but something about her carried a quiet grace. She hesitated at the doorway as if uncertain she belonged in such a humble place. With a small, almost apologetic smile, she said softly, "My bike has a flat, could you help?" Her voice was gentle, yet carried a weight Daniel couldn't quite place. Without a moment's thought, he nodded, motioning her toward the stand. Daniel bent down and began working, his hands steady and practiced. Years of repairing old and battered bicycles made this elegant machine seem almost foreign, yet he treated it no differently from the rest. The woman watched in silence, her eyes tracing the care in his every movement. She noticed how he hummed while he worked, how he inspected the tire twice to be sure it would hold, and how he handled the bike as though it belonged to someone dear to him. When he finished, Daniel brushed his hands clean on a rag and smiled. "There you go. Should ride smoothly now." She reached into her pocket to pay, but he shook his head firmly. "No need. The road should always be safe for everyone." His words lingered in the air, simple yet profound. For a moment, she couldn't speak. People usually saw her for her wealth, yet here was a man who saw only a traveler in need. As Daniel tightened the last bolt, the quiet hum of laughter drifted in from the street. A group of children burst through the doorway, their small bikes rattling and squeaking with every turn of the wheels. "Uncle Dan," they called out cheerfully, rushing to him as though his little shop was their safe haven. One boy showed a broken chain, another pointed to a loose pedal, and a little girl clutched the handlebars of her pink bike, the bell dangling uselessly. Daniel's face lit up with genuine warmth. One at a time, he chuckled, kneeling down as though their troubles were the most important thing in the world. The young woman stood silently, watching. She saw how Daniel never asked them for money, how he crouched on the dusty floor without hesitation, working quickly so they could be back outside playing. As he fixed each bike, he asked about their school, their families, their dreams. They answered with giggles and stories, completely at ease in his presence. It was clear to her that this man wasn't just a mechanic. He was a guardian of small joys, someone who carried other people's burdens without complaint. Her eyes grew misty. For years, she had been surrounded by people who measured her worth by the size of her fortune. Yet here was a man who gave freely with nothing in return but a smile. In that moment, she felt a pull in her heart, a reminder that humanity's truest wealth is found in compassion. When Daniel finally handed the polished bike back to her, his smile carried the quiet pride of a man who found joy in simple service. The woman reached for her wallet, determined to pay him generously, but he gently raised his hand. "No," he said with calm certainty, "just promise me you'll pass on the kindness someday." That's worth more than money." His words were so steady, so sincere, that for a moment she was left speechless. She had met thousands of people in her life, business partners, investors, so-called friends, but no one had ever refused her wealth so simply. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tucked the wallet back into her pocket. She took a deep breath, the weight of years pressing against her chest. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice softer than before, "I'm not just another traveler passing through. I own one of the biggest companies in the country." She paused, searching his eyes, almost fearful of how he might react. "I came here because I was searching for something money couldn't buy. And watching you, seeing the way you treat these children, the way you give without hesitation, I think I've just found it." For a long moment, silence filled the small shop. Daniel stood still, his hands still stained with grease, his heart pounding at her confession. But instead of awe or envy, his expression softened into quiet understanding. To him, she wasn't a billionaire. She was simply someone who longed to be seen for who she truly was. Daniel's mind swirled with disbelief, but his heart remained calm. He had no interest in riches, nor did her revelation change the way he saw her. To him, she was still the same woman who had walked into his modest shop with a broken bike and kind eyes. Emma looked at him nervously, as though waiting for him to treat her differently, the way so many others had. But Daniel simply smiled, wiping his hands on his rag. "Titles, money, none of that matters here," he said gently. "What matters is the person standing in front of me." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as a billionaire, not as a powerful figure, but as a human being. "Do you mind if I come back sometimes?" she asked, her voice wavering with hope. "Not as the owner of a company, not as anyone important, just as a friend." Daniel nodded warmly. "My door is always open," he replied. The air seemed lighter, as though the dusty old workshop had transformed into something sacred. Emma mounted her bicycle, the one he had mended with such care, and pedaled down the street. The golden light of sunset wrapped around her, and she glanced back once, her smile radiant and free. Daniel stood at the doorway, watching her disappear into the horizon. A quiet whisper escaped his lips, a truth he had always believed: kindness is the only treasure worth keeping.